Good morning and welcome to the last edition of Talking Sai Boss. My name is Stephen Chia, and after 10 a.m. I'm going to be speaking to a panel of experts on financial inclusion.
And Steve and I at the moment are joined by Jacob Katzman, Chairman and Chief Executive of the Global Trade Corporation, and also Joel Lang, MD of Risk and Compliance for Dow Jones. So let's start with you, Jacob. And first of all, what are the major challenges facing corporate treasurers from a trade finance angle?
From the trade finance angle, the several challenges. One of the biggest challenges is where is the information? Where is information around letters of credit, bank guarantees? Because a lot of the big corporates, this information is decentralized. Some information may be going to business units, some information may be going to Treasury. And when you're looking to consolidate and report, because this information is in paper form, it's very difficult to grab a handle, for example, of what are contingent liabilities outstanding for the guarantees we have, because we may know the nominal amounts, but after amendments and reductions, because that information is in paper form, it's very difficult to get a handle.
But I get a sense there's a move towards digitalisation, so you forget the paper, and quite frankly, I'm quite surprised it hasn't been done before. So do you think there is a real momentum behind changing that and turning it into a digitalisation form?
Absolutely, and I see more and more companies adopting solutions such as ours, which is a multi-bank solution for trade finance, which helps consolidate information into a single portal from where the corporate treasury can make decisions and have visibility and control over their global operations.
So how's it actually going to be achieved? What's the reality of it?
The reality is there has to be a desire from a senior management perspective of a corporate to make a change. And we see that the companies such as Volvo, companies such as Nokia in Finland, who has taken the initiatives to do that, and they said, we're not going to wait, we're going to lead the way. Those companies are going to be the first to achieve those objectives because they've made a decision, and there are technologies today to support that.
Well, Jacob, okay. I'll come back to you in just a moment.
That's right. We'll speak to Joel a bit because, I mean, if you can also share with us the challenges in the world of compliance, similar to some of those, I would believe.
Absolutely. There's challenges in relation to the challenge of data. There's challenges in relation to transactions and ensuring that they're not going out to the wrong people. And so terrorist financing is an issue, issues around anti-money laundering, issues around trade finance. And I think the message that we're seeing in the market is that it's not as easy as just downloading a list and looking at what literally the regulators are putting out. You actually have to look at what the spirit of regulation is, and that's a challenge because it's not obvious. You need to actually take consultation, you need to read between the lines and find the information that's out there.
And that's really tough. In fact, banks have often been asking, just give me a list and I'll check it. That makes my life a bit easier. But when you do it on a more flexible case-by-case, they're not quite sure when you cross the line and when you haven't crossed the line. So what then? I mean, in terms of moving forward, how do you think some of these issues will be resolved?
So, one thing that we're here at Sai Boss, and we're delighted to be here at Sai Boss with SWIFT as our partner to launch the sanctions ownership research database within the SWIFT sanctions screening platform. So the value-added services that SWIFT has provided to its members in terms of compliance have reduced the cost of compliance. It's split that cost and allowed organizations to leverage economies of scale. What we've done is added a layer of premium content to ensure that organizations are more compliant, that they're finding those needles in the haystack.
But should compliance be a burden? Do some of the organizations, the institutions feel that it's really just another layer of work that I have to do?
Well, I think there's a combination. There's an element of box ticking to say, I need to do exactly what the regulators are saying, but there's also an element of saying there's sanctions compliance, there's money laundering, there's a responsibility of the global community to stop terrorist financing, to ensure that the financial system is clean. And so it's a responsibility, and with that great responsibility comes some costs and some burdens.
Okay, I thought you were going to quote Spider-Man for a moment there, but,
From a trade finance point of view, I know the corporate adoption of MT798 messages has been one of the key areas. What's the latest update on that?
Well, the adoption is growing. I think that's the point, is that we see in our pipeline more and more demand. You're going to be hearing more announcements very soon about new deals, new companies adopting it. And we've seen the benefits that this provides.
What benefits are you talking about?
Good question. The benefits essentially is to standardize communication with your banks, because banks today don't like to have anybody in between them and their clients. There are some solutions out there today, which are hubs, which are basically concentrating information in a portal, and that portal essentially requires importers, exporters, and the banks to be members. And that's a very difficult value proposition, because banks hate having anybody between them and their clients. What SWIFT provides is essentially just to exchange messaging through standards.
So done discreetly?
Not really discreetly, it's just as far as instead of sharing and exchanging information through a bank's proprietary platforms, imagine if a client has 20 banks. It's not practical for them to be logging in to 20 different banks' portals to receive their trade information. Now with SWIFT 798 messages for trade, and there are about 50 different messages, they're now able to exchange that information electronically with all their banks using these messages.
So it's just an easier platform, but in a way, that's what regulators are asking, for you to be sharing more information compared to many years ago. Now you have to share more information. They want to look for that money trail to be sure that it's coming from the right place or going to the right place. Joel?
Absolutely, and you know, there's been a lot of talk this week about utilities and the utilities that SWIFT provides and other providers provide in terms of different asset classes. And one part of that is reducing costs, but another part of that is sharing information, and where we can leverage information to improve efficiencies, but also find connections that can be used to mitigate financial crime, mitigate sanctions issues.
Well, let's be positive. Let's talk about some key industry innovations. What have you got for us?
Well, one of the things that we announced a couple of weeks ago, that we've integrated SWIFT Lite 2 with our own application. And we were the first in the world to do that. Now, for those of you who don't know what is a Lite 2, I'm not going to try to explain it in 5 seconds. But just to say that if you're going to implement SWIFT as a corporate, you're going to learn a lot of things. You're going to get your IT involved. You got to basically install something. You're going to learn how to use it. We've taken that and outsourced it basically to us, meaning that we can offer a turnkey solution, and we can connect a corporate to SWIFT, as well as give them a trade application out of the box. So that simplifies adoption and speeds up.
Simplification. We like speed.
Simple is good.
How about for you?
What do you think, Joe?
Well, I think it's fascinating to hear about these connections on the corporate to bank side, because I think that's really the next wave when we see what's coming down the pipe in terms of trade-based money laundering, sanctions compliance. Corporates are being involved in that equation, and so innovation is really key, because the banks have been experienced with compliance for many, many years, but corporates have been less exposed, and in order for them to comply, but also not break the bank, so to speak, in terms of the cost of compliance, there needs to be innovation to drive efficiencies, and we'll see that happening, I think, in the next few years.
Well said. And we've got to reveal a secret about these two gentlemen. They've both got 3 boys, haven't you? There's something in your DNA. And I know you said a lovely thing earlier to me when we first met, that you come to Sai Boss and it exceeds your expectations. Is that? Do you mean
exactly.
that?
I think there's a magic of Sai Boss, and no matter how much you prepare for it, you'll always find some type of unexpected contact and meet someone new, and so so it's really exciting to be here.
Oh, great.
So it's not like what your kid asked you. Said, "Dad, you're going on holiday again?"
Exactly.
No, I'm really going for me. There's real work happening here.
Yeah, well, we do have fun, but it is we get work done as well.
Okay,
well, thank you very much, guys. It's been a fascinating chat. Thank you very much to Jacob and Joel. Well, time for our last quick visit to the SWIFT stand for the Wii game.
Take a look.
Zoe Blackery, who's been doing a sterling job getting all sorts of people playing the Wii game. Yes, and still got a great smile on her face. I'll tell you what would really help is that you took us through the game. So how do we play it?
Certainly. Right, the way that it works is that I'll get people to come up and they have to put their names in first. So more people that play, obviously, the more donations can be made.
And then you press done.
And then you press done once they've done that, and then you go through and literally just select your colour that you want to play with. So I'm going to select blue on that side, and I'm going to go for red on this side. And then the aim of the game is to charge up your spinning top. So the way that you charge it is by shaking the controller, and you need to stay in the optimal area of the white zone. You press go, so they start shaking. So you shake the controllers, whichever way, up or down, side to side, whichever.
You're very good at this.
5 seconds, and then let activity commence. So then there's like a battle of the tops, and eventually one of them gets smashed out and the other one carries on.
You're raising loads of money for charity at the moment, so we need people to come down and play.
We need as many people as possible to come down. It's very quick. It literally takes about 30 seconds to play the game, so it's really fast, and the more people that come, the more money we can raise, and it'll be great if you could just come and join in.
Gentlemen, I know you're friends, so whoever wins, please do carry on with your meeting afterwards. So I know you're going to do battle, be gladiators. Good luck when you play the Wii game. Let's get you over there for the starting block.
And go.
Shake like mad. Come on, you can do it.
Yes.
Yes, let battle commence.
And that was a very quick battle.
And you are still friends, aren't you? So well done. Do you want to just do a victory parade? Hands in the air and go, yes, thank you. Well done, congratulations. Lovely talking to you both, and enjoy the rest of your meeting and the rest of your day. Thank you. I must say you've got very good wrist
Really? I
articulation.
haven't had a chance to go down yet, so maybe later today I'll go down and give it a whirl, because
it's a sight actually for great eyes. Yeah, go along and see that lady, because they're
know.
raising great money.
It is for a great cause after all.
Yeah, beyond social services, and anybody who plays, Swift donate €15.
That's
so
right.
it's fabulous. And I know the total is getting increasingly higher and higher each day, so I haven't been given the final figure, but
That's right.
well done to them. Well, yesterday I spoke to Marcus Treacher from Swift, also about corporate treasury, and I started by asking him the following. Well, let's start by looking at what are the biggest challenges for corporate treasurers. What do you see them as?
It's really about information, and information to establish and maintain good control over the operations financially of an organisation. So treasurers are hungry for good information around the operations of the network globally, which gives them the ability to act and control and be very effective for the firm as a whole.
And what do you think are the key multi-banking services that those corporate treasurers truly value?
Well, number one is awareness. So feed of information, statement reporting, other richer information to the treasury management systems that these treasurers would use. That's very important. That's the beginning, and that's where most treasurers we work with focus most. Once they have that information, it's really about transacting effectively, safely, securely, and immediately based on what they now see and what they now know about the workings of the financials of the organisation.
Now, innovation's always around us. Life is constantly evolving. So what additional services do you think banks should deliver to those multi-bank corporations?
A lot of it's around really good, incisive advice. So the technology that connects those treasurers to their multi-banks over Swift gives the base with which to have good advisory, collaborative conversations with the bank RM based on a good understanding of how these organizations are ticking financially, and also where there are opportunities to do things more effectively and where maybe there are inefficiencies that could be focused on with the bank.
So what kind of inefficiencies are you talking about?
There may be flow of payments in certain countries, whether it's a flow through to pay low value payments, or it could be use of funds, or it could be use of working capital, tying up funds in working capital, and ways to just really fine-tune how capital is used in an organisation, so that there's a right balance between control of risk, liquidity risk, and also kind of overuse of funds that could be used more effectively elsewhere.
And how do you think Swift can actually progress the Treasury agenda in general?
Swift is the pipeline. It's the plumbing of the financial system. And by plugging corporate treasurers into Swift directly, we open up the ability for them to connect to their banks, to start dealing with their banks very effectively and simply. And that very simple thing triggers a very wide range of value add that the banks can then offer. in the days before we opened up SWIFT for corporate access, the corporates only dealt with the banks via several independent internet banking systems, all with their own key codes and log-on procedures, all their own methods, information standards. It's really hard to get a feel for what's really going on and how to act with information. With SWIFT, we help them remove all that clutter and get lovely connection with in a multi-banked environment. And that's the real magic that enables these corporate treasurers to really start to engage with their banks on value-add discussions.
Now I get the impression that corporates are increasingly looking to banks to be less product-focused, less bank-centric and more customer-centric. Now everybody wants to be customer-centric, but how do you actually achieve that?
It's a really good question, and that ties in very nicely, I think, to the whole inner tribe idea of Sai Boss, where if an organisation, whether it's a bank or a corporate or a small commercial company, if they can really start understanding the needs of their customers, the needs of the other individuals and corporates they serve, that's where they start to create true value. And what banks are doing increasingly now, and you see this a lot at Sai Boss, is trying to move away from the pre-cooked, pre-structured product to a much more rich dialogue with customers so that they can create and adapt product with a much clearer understanding of the true value that needs to be added or the true challenges that need to be dealt with and properly handled. So it's really about moving the dialogue up the value chain from a set of objects that you would buy in as a shop to a series of capabilities that you can have a conversation with somebody about to create value in a way that really, really counts. No company is the same, no sector is the same. They have their unique value requirements that really only come to life when you're having that engaged dialogue.
Well, it sounds fantastic, but I get this sense that whenever we go to work, we forget that we're consumers and customers, and we put on a different corporate hat.
Right.
So how can we ensure that, you know, everybody thinks, actually, I am a consumer myself, I am a customer, I'm a human being? It's humanising the dialogue. Do you think you're capable of doing that as an industry?
I think we are. We are. As an industry, we have always been historically customer-centric, customer-focused, and it's something that's in the lifeblood of banking, whether it's the branch managers, whether it's the correspondent banking RM, it's in the lifeblood. So it's really about unlocking that natural ability to work with people. And actually, I think that's a big strength of the banking sector. And if we can, do a better job of creating the environments whereby we can have that dialogue with our customers, where we can talk more broadly about their needs, using the data that SWIFT would provide, they can see, we can see. And in doing so, we can really enable the natural connectivity that was always there to really come through and to be used more effectively.
Now, finally, I'm quite interested about the role of corporate treasurers and chief financial officers. Has that changed of late?
Over the past, decade or so, they've become much more empowered. So as information has become more available to an organisation, as providers like SWIFT have enabled greater connectivity, greater awareness, these job functions have become much more important to organisations as there's much more focus on getting that liquidity level just right, making sure the efficiency is there, making sure the flows are appropriate. The roles have become much more important. So we see, dealing with corporate treasurers and CFOs, people with much more influence in the organisation they work with than they would do, say 10 years ago.
Well, Marcus Treacher, thank you very much for your time.
Pleasure, thank you.
Well, thank you again to Marcus for that truly fascinating discussion. Well, it's time to visit the Art at Sai Boss Project for the last time. Oh, and this is another Singaporean charity helped by the very good people at SWIFT.
Let's take a look.
This is a brilliant piece. Now, it's probably quite self-explanatory because I can spot major currencies from around the world. So where did you get your ideas from?
From internet, so we need to spread a lot of countries, money, so you make it very interesting.
How long did it take you to do this piece?
Like 2 hours.
2 hours? Gosh, you're quick, you're prolific, aren't you? And I hear you're going to be having your own exhibition soon.
Yeah.
So when's that going to be opening? Is it sometime in October?
3rd of November. I
Oh,
think.
November time.
Yeah.
Okay. So is that the first time you've ever had an exhibition displaying your work? Are you excited about that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I know.
Very nervous.
Yeah, well, there's no need to be because your work is so fantastic. So I hope you're going to carry on doing these brilliant pieces. Well done to you, and good luck with your exhibition that's going to be opening in November.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do you enjoy coming to here to express your artistic side?
Yeah, I feel like coming here I can be myself without being judged. Yeah.
Well, I think that's a very poignant thing to say, be yourself without being judged. But would you mind if I judged your piece? I think it's fantastic. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
So you worked on this together. So tell us the inspiration behind the money graph. What's the connection with finance?
Since Sibos is also about money, and we decided to make it like a money graph
to show like how much the money has been raised.
And what's the materials you've used here?
We've used felt.
And like some of the coins we use like we buy from stores, and then some of the coins we use from cardboard.
So do you think this is worth a lot of money, this piece?
Yes, handmade. This is handmade.
This
We
is really hard to make.
We broke a needle because of this.
2 needles.
So it sounds like you've had to put a lot of work in here and really think through how you're going to put this piece together. I think it's an extraordinary piece, the money graph. So, girls, congratulations on it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This is one of the few places where I can actually focus, because the best place I had before this was either my classroom or my school's canteen. That's all I got. My house wasn't really a very good environment for me to do my stuff, my homework. So coming down here, we can just do our own projects, hone our skills, or even like do our own homework to improve our studies here. Mr. Akram is always glad to welcome us to come here to do our own stuff. Yeah, so this is like a second home to me.
Well, many congratulations, and we wish you all the best for the future.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Oh, I loved those children and
Yep.
young adults. They were fab to
I was so
interview.
inspired. I drew my own. Yeah, this is a very popular drawing these days because my son simply loves cars. So,
Yeah.
so
Is that
we go-
stick man?
It's a stick man. It is, but you know, he goes around and he can tell. He can say Ferrari. You know.
It's
a
funny how that
Lamborghini,
isn't
and
displayed
this
around
is
the conference.
Yeah. That's right. Who knows?
Yeah.
I should try. Maybe I could make a buck or two.
Well, I like to encourage people, but just stick to your day job.
Okay. All right. Well, we hope you enjoyed that series. Of course, the artworks are all and about here. If you have a chance to see some of them and like to buy some of them, you can do so as well. Well, yesterday I had the good fortune to host a discussion on financial inclusion with some of the brightest minds around. Here it is. Well, thanks so much for joining us here on Sai Boss TV. We are going to be talking about financial inclusion. Perhaps, Christine, let me start off with you. You know, the challenges, particularly in developing nations today, what do you think it would be in terms of trying to be more inclusive in this financial sector?
Well, I think the last statistics were that there's something like 2 billion people that are unbanked and don't have access to permanent financial services, to bank, to get insurance, those types of things that we take for granted in the developed world. And so the challenge is to get them to have financial services on a more permanent, sustainable basis. And what we're looking for in fintech is a way to perhaps use mobile payments and modern technology to bring people into the banking services. So it's an exciting era to think about using modern technology for financial inclusion.
Well, Akhtar, let me ask you, because there is a big program that's been started in India, Janda Yojana. Did I say that correctly?
Yes, another.
Yeah. And that's reached out to many all over India, many bank accounts being set up. Is there a need for such programs to step up and help drive momentum in this area?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that the identification system and the financial services systems that India has introduced has done is that it has actually reached over 800 million people, which is a massive number. And to really look at it from the perspective that a lot of these people are not educated, and to be able to get them into the system, that is massive. Now, India is very interesting because almost working with government, there is a tremendous amount of financial services that is already available, and the systems are all set. The problem is who's going to pay the cost of the transactions. And that's something that has not been sorted out yet. Even though the cost may be low, with just 3%, 3.7%, the question is who's going to pay for it? And the end user who's in poverty, that cost becomes very high.
Right.
So that's one of the challenges that one also needs to look at. So it's the question becomes that we can set up these systems, but then how do you think about paying for it?
Right.
Which is where I think this whole conversation with fintech, and particularly the startup community, becomes quite interesting. Because if you can look at the startup community working with the financial systems, maybe you can drive the cost down a little bit more.
Okay, so technology in a way can help bridge that divide because you skip a few steps and you make it more accessible. Adiza, let me ask you, because you're from such an industry where tech is, how is tech changing, especially in rural areas, like India, in helping people become more inclusive in what they're doing?
So I'd say that it's a first step. So there are a number of different initiatives around the world that are happening, but a lot of people aren't necessarily aware of those initiatives. So making sure that people realize that this is a genuine business opportunity is really important. We have companies that are coming out of London, such as DuPay, who are actually operating in places like Egypt, and they have over 20,000 people using their systems to actually help employment services software actually employers pay their employees in a better way, and also to give their employees a card, so bringing them into the financial system. And previously, that wouldn't have been the case. And they're operating from London, and they were part of the Barclays Techstar program, and that program has now expanded into South Africa. And so there are a number of ways that this is happening, but a lot of people aren't necessarily aware. And so conversations like this are really important to actually bring it up the agenda. So it's not a sideline topic, it's core. You have people investing in this space, such as the Amida Network and the IFC, who are actually making commercial investments as well as grant-making organizations.
Yeah. Like very quickly, if I can ask you, so does it help address that concern that Akhtar mentioned about the cost? So does it help sort of eliminate some of that cost that perhaps an end user might have to face?
It does, because you need to have the investment in the space to actually allow the customer to be reached. And a lot of these companies need a lot of financing to do that. And so highlighting the different mechanisms to finance these initiatives that startups are doing is important, but understanding the context that you're operating in is important. And I guess Costa can go into the context
what do you
deeply.
think, Costa?
Yeah, so there is a couple of parameters in the equation. So technology will bring the cost down. In our estimate, we think that technology can bring essentially digital finance can bring the cost of transactions down by 90%. So that's a huge, huge enabler to serve the poor people whose transaction average size is very low. Because it needs to be actually a sustainable business. This is not about charity, it's not about CSR, it is about serving these and including these populations, but in a context that makes business sense. And so that's kind of one parameter to the equation. The second parameter is, I think, the scale that is brought. We mentioned the number 2 billion. This is a huge scale, and that parameter actually changes the entire business model picture for the financial sector, for the telecommunications sector, who is very important because the last mile, it was mentioned, is mobile phones. Very simple ones, but nevertheless very pervasive technology. And and then also another part of the equation is regulation and how can that may be pro-inclusive, but without compromising. So these are the equations. This is the equation to be solved by the private sector.
So I actually want to kind of challenge a couple of assumptions. There's nothing wrong with charity. There's nothing wrong with CSR. And companies should actually not stop looking at it. You cannot make money on the backs of the poor. Let's just, they're poor because there is a reason why they're called poor. They're not the middle class, they're not the lower middle class, they're the poor. And many people who live under $2 a day, they are under abject poverty. Now the question becomes, how do you actually get them into the formal system? And what many companies, like Professor Michael Porter at Harvard, is saying, use some of your CSR programs from a shared value perspective, where your CSR is actually becoming the research and development arm for emerging market investments, so that you can write off some of that money as a CSR activity. But if you do it in a way that actually helps you build a business at the bottom of the economic pyramid, then you get a win-win situation, right? So I think that what we want companies to do, particularly here, is that this is a long-term investment. You're not going to be able to make the kinds of returns, which is why the Indian banking system is looking at it and say, yeah, we've got all the systems, but who's going to pay our 3% of the cost? Now, if you look at it and say that there is some of that cost that they might be able to incur because they want to serve that last mile, that is important. I think one of the things that Costa said yesterday is that if you bring them into the formal market, now you increase their economic potential. Now you actually flip them from being abject poverty into putting them on an escalator for economic growth.
Okay, so and that's the point, because you don't want charity forever. So you really are about, it's not sustainable. Foundations can come in and kickstart and get the momentum going, right? Yeah. But you need to flip them to get onto the other page where the rest of us are.
Right. I think it's about having a diversified mix and a diversified approach to this. It's so important to make sure that you don't have a one-hit approach, because this is a complex problem, and you actually need to make sure that you're thinking about it with multiple strategies, but in a long-term way, as all good businesses should do.
And I think that's a really good point, because they might, we look at refugees and payments, for example, which is kind of a really specific group that we're trying to bring into the financial services sector. And so I think what we start out doing is, obviously they can't afford financial services in the same way that we can, perhaps. So you start off with a business that maybe isn't all that profitable, but at the end, you're moving them into the financial services sector, you're getting them jobs, you're helping them rebuild their lives, and then they become taxpayers. They obviously can then afford better financial services. So I think you might start off with, kind of a social banking concept, but it moves into much more of a viable business model. So as you were saying, long term it's viable, but the short term is not going to be for a lot of the fintech startups.
Tech industries are doing some very interesting stuff with the refugee crisis. So Google is set up, got its employees, and it set up an open source effort, crowdsourcing translation services. So now people are using the Google apps to get translations, to get directions, right? So the route is being mapped. Facebook is providing them with other services because of WhatsApp. So there are all of these things that are coming in where existing platforms, employees, and some of the CSR arms are doing, with the expectation that these guys are then going to become part of their ecosystem, will have the accounts, and then they will be able to monetize it at some point.
Okay, but these guys are kind of willing to take that first mover step, to take a bit of a risk, because they don't have any monetary gain from doing this, not directly, but they are looking at a long-term approach. Will financial institutions take the same approach? Will they be willing to do that first before reaping the rewards? Costa?
Yeah, I think probably not. They will require some more assurance and some de-risking in the beginning, which is why I'm here and talking to them, because we can de-risk for a longer term benefit. And so, but we are here at Sai Boss in a context that is risk averse. So it is necessary to explain and to really guide the industry towards this. It's not going to happen overnight.
And I guess something that we've been discussing over the last few months is how to highlight the products and services that are actually already out there. So if somebody wants to go out and find out, if there is no one-stop shop or one-stop place to know how to find all these solutions that are out there, all these initiatives. And that's something that needs to be highlighted more, whether it's through events or through databases, etc.
Yeah. And the one thing also to add, because I have seen experiments in the banking sector actually fail in this, because it is a different customer segment, it is a different business, it is a different setup, it's a different set of partnerships. I mentioned telcos before. So it does require some, to use my terminology, getting out of the castle into a sandbox, partnership sandbox, to experiment what works for a particular bank, what works for the industry. And that's really what we're here to assist, really, the particular banks, but also the industry. With our vision, we call it the Level 1 project. That's really about progressing collaboration to establish a platform for better competition.
But that's also a big challenge, because you are, again, asking them to get out of their castle, which is a bit risky, and some will say, is it worth the risk? They haven't seen the benefits yet. And sometimes experiments don't work.
Well, and it's funny talking about the law, and what drives banks is, do I know my customer? I have to do this anti-money laundering compliance and make sure they're not a terrorist or whatever it is. But in fact, when you go back to the genesis of those regulations, they do say that if your situation is low risk, you don't have to apply anti-money laundering laws. And I think that we forget that as financial institutions. So when we're proposing, let's do a refugee payment project, we always say, look, the law says you don't, if it's low risk, and we've determined that it is because it's a set group of people in a set country, let's say, AML laws don't apply. So you can actually go in and invest with a lot less of a cost than it would as a banking project. So I think we need to go back to the law and say, well, actually, the law will help us to drive this innovation.
But I would also add to that, it's about how to be forward thinking about changing the culture of the conversation as well. And that will only happen when we highlight the number of things that are out there. And that's still not happening. So a number of different people here are not aware of the multiple amount of products that are actually helping solve some of these problems already.
And let me just add to that. I mean, I think if you look at the tech industry, a lot of the growth has also happened because of startup innovation. Startup innovation that has then got acquired into mainstream companies. I think that's also what needs to happen in the financial sector. You've got the fintech startup community that is actually doing the innovation. Now you've got the financial industry supporting them. Barclays, all the banks are all part of that. Now, as that system becomes robust and starts growing, and as you start seeing some of the impact of the work that these startups are doing, these banks will start acquiring them. Right? That is what is going to happen. And that's where you then start achieving scale, right? So that has to become part of that equation, which is why I think that a lot more needs to be done in the startup ecosystem and the fintech community, because that's where the hedging of the bet is going to happen within the financial industry. Because they're obviously risk averse, but here you can actually take a risk, you can make an investment, and if it succeeds, you can then actually look at it as an
So are you then saying that the startups, the small enterprises, should take the first step to do something and challenge the big boys, so to speak, and say, I'm doing it differently this way?
Well, I think it's already happening.
Yeah, it is.
And I think that the problem is that a lot of people aren't aware that it's happening. So DuPay is doing something already, but DuPay went into the Barclays Techstars Accelerator, and that actually was very helpful for them to understand how to work with a bank. And the talent within the company also has a number of people that are experts in the financial industry as well.
Yeah, and also examples are good to show the earlier adopters. I will speak later today with the CEO of bKash in Bangladesh. So they are doing something like 70 million transactions per month, growing tremendously. So just to put this in perspective, Swift does 20 million a day, but it is actually getting into the ballpark. And it is growing. So also role models, examples of how, because this works actually.
And it is working.
It is working. So good examples, as you say, shared with the community is also a very good way to induce people to get into the risk.
And bKash has a pedigree. I mean, these are people who've been part of the Grameen financial system for decades. I mean, they actually built this alternative financial model. And so there are enough players that are out there. I think part of the fact that it is not known, but also I think what needs to happen is investment resources need to flow into this space. As much as investment resources have flowed into the technology startup ecosystem, more investments need to flow into this. And I think what Gates is doing is accelerating that pace because they are taking away some of the pain of doing the research and the development. So I think that there is this, and InnoTribe is really this great community that is trying to foster that, and which is why we all think that this is where more needs to happen.
And it's also a very global conversation. So things that are happening in one market may be applied to another, but it has to depend on the context of that market.
Correct.
As with all projects in emerging markets, and projects globally actually, your context is key, and understanding and making sure that that's at the forefront of the conversation is important, just like with any other business.
Sure. But from what I'm hearing, it sounds like the basic premise is there and it already works. Now it's just how do you customize it and use it uniquely in your own environment, and of course to your own benefit later on. So awareness seems to be the key. Any last words, folks? We're just running out of time.
Our objective at Gates is 80% of all adults on the planet to be connected by 2035. So we're here too.
Yeah, and I would say that it's also about partnerships within the ecosystem. So we're already discussing how to bring the awareness conversation around this topic up to the forefront of the conversation, and making sure that more people are aware of that is very important.
For us, our goal is to bring financial inclusion just to the refugee sector, and it's interesting to hear these conversations and have the conversations because obviously we don't want to reinvent financial technology. We want to just use what's out there to make payments more efficient and quicker. So it's it's fantastic to be here and meet people that are actually doing that already to help the crisis.
I mean, I want to urge and put a massive spotlight on the current refugee crisis and the opportunities for financial institutions to step into that. And I think that there needs to be a combination of people that are going to look at it from the perspective that we can be risk takers, we have an obligation.
Yes, we do.
We can work with the innovators, and that it will have an immediate impact. And that needs to start without really worrying about what's going to happen 10 years from now, because that is such a critical lifeline for these individuals. And I think the systems exist. Somebody just needs to step into it.
Bring it all together. I mean, that's what we're finding. There needs to be which is why we decided to be one of them, an organization that brings all the pieces together and, shoots out the solution to help save lives and get payments that are desperately needed. So,
but I also think making sure that you engage with those in the social sector who are already doing some of this stuff as well, and not in isolation, is very important, because we don't want to just repeat things and make products that are already out there.
Well, we are such a global world today. You can't really do anything in isolation. Everything kind of works together. Well, thank you all so much for coming. Thank you for joining us and for speaking with us.
Thank you very much.
I thought that was a great panel discussion. What I love about Sai Boss is the fact they're prepared to tackle subjects rather than sweep them under the carpet. And financial inclusion is a real juicy one that many others would steer clear of, but it's a reality how to look at millennials and also that migrant crisis. And I think it's been really sensitively handled.
I mean, if you think about it, I mean, we are talking about end users. If there's no one using whatever you've created, then it's pointless. So you've got to make sure everyone has a chance to have an access to it, rather.
Absolutely. It's a right.
Well, we want to thank that panel so much. We are going to take a break here on Sai Boss TV, but join us later again for Sai Boss Game Changer. We'll see you later on.
See you.